Has McLaren just made the mistake that could destroy their season? Or are we seeing the start of an internal war led by Piastri and Webber after the China disaster? Because what happened was not normal. It was not just any abandonment. It was a direct sign that something within the team is not working, and the most worrying thing is not the technical failure. It is the reaction that came afterwards, where Piastri and his entourage have begun to move in a way that could change everything within McLaren. Today I'm going to tell you why this abandonment in China not only exposes the team, but it could be the exact moment in which Webber and Piastri launched the first great internal pressure. And nothing will be the same again. The Chinese Grand Prix not only left McLaren without results, it exposed a crack that until now had remained hidden under the team's recent success, because what happened in Shanghai does not fit within the normal mistakes at the beginning of the season, but rather points directly to a much deeper structural problem that hits Oscar Piastri squarely and inevitably activates the figure of Mark Webber within this entire story. McLaren reached this point as a reference as the team that had managed to rebuild itself to the top after years of difficulties, with a car that had proven to be competitive, with a solid technical base and with two drivers capable of fighting for everything. But in a matter of minutes that whole story collapsed, because neither of the two cars could even start, and that completely changes the internal and external perception of the team. And this is where Piastri's situation becomes especially critical, because we are not talking about just any driver within the structure. We are talking about someone who had just established himself as one of the great figures of the championship, someone who had already proven to be ready to fight for titles, but who at this start of the season finds himself trapped in a chain of errors and failures that do not depend entirely on him, but that end up directly affecting his image and his position within the team. First there was Australia, that unexpected blow in his home race that left him out before even starting, a moment that already generated doubts and pressure. But China takes it to another level, because here it is no longer an isolated incident. Here we are seeing how the entire project fails, how the car does not respond, how the team does not offer clear answers. And that is exactly the type of situation that sets off all the alarms within the environment of a driver like Piastri. Because there is something that is not said openly but that is evident when you analyze the context. When a team cannot clearly explain why its two cars fail, and furthermore those failures are different from each other, what is at stake is not only reliability, it is the credibility of the entire project. It is the confidence that they really have control of what they are building in the face of a new technical era where every detail counts. And it is precisely at this point where Mark Webber comes in as a key piece, not from the media noise, but from a much more dangerous position for McLaren, because his role is not that of a passive representative, it is that of someone who perfectly understands how this sport works from within, who has experienced complex structures and who knows exactly when a team begins to lose control of its internal narrative. The reconfiguration of Piastri's environment is not coincidental. It is not simply a matter of logistics or presence in the paddock. It is a sign that a more technical, more strategic structure is being built, capable of analyzing and putting pressure on the team at key moments, and that fits perfectly with what we are seeing after China. A growing, silent, but very clear pressure on McLaren to give immediate explanations and solutions. Because if there is one thing that defines this moment, it is the lack of answers, and in Formula One that is the most dangerous thing that can exist, since when you are not clear about where the problem is, you are also not clear about how to solve it, and meanwhile time progresses, the rivals evolve and the window of opportunity to compete for the championship begins to close little by little. In this scenario, Piastri stops being just a driver affected by the team's problems and begins to become the epicenter of an internal pressure that can change dynamics within McLaren, because with Webber behind him, each failure is no longer just a negative result. It is a direct question to the team. Do you really have control of this project, or are you losing it just when it matters most? What happens after China is no longer just analysis. It is movement, it is internal tension, it is a silent change in the power dynamics within McLaren, because while the team tries to contain the crisis with unclear technical explanations, from Oscar Piastri's side something much more serious begins to be built. A direct demand for answers, responsibilities, and above all, guarantees for the future. Because this is where the bomb really takes shape, not in explosive statements to the press, but in the way in which Webber and Piastri's entourage begin to position themselves in front of the team, making it clear that this is not a simple blip, but a problem that can compromise the entire project if it is not corrected immediately, and that completely changes the relationship between driver and team. There is a detail that marks this turning point, and that is that McLaren, instead of offering a forceful explanation, has left more doubts than certainties, indirectly pointing to the power system and its supplier, which in internal terms translates into something very delicate. The team has not fully identified the problem, or at least is not willing to expose it publicly, and that generates immediate distrust in any driver who is fighting for a championship. And that is where Webber comes in with all his strategic weight, because we are not talking about a manager who simply accompanies us. We are talking about someone who perfectly understands when a project begins to falter, and who knows that these types of moments are key to defining whether a pilot should continue betting on a structure or start seriously questioning it from within. The pressure they are exerting is not emotional, it is surgical. It is a pressure that forces McLaren to look internally, to review its processes, its technical integration, its relationship with the engine supplier, and, above all, its real capacity to compete in a season where every mistake costs a lot. Because let's not forget that we are at the beginning of a new regulation, where teams that react late simply disappear from the fight. Furthermore, the fact that the failures in China were different in each car only aggravates the situation, because it eliminates the possibility of a specific error and points directly to a systemic problem. Something that from the point of view of a driver like Piastri is even more worrying than abandonment, since it calls into question the technical basis on which the entire project is being built. In this scenario, Piastri's figure begins to change within the team. He stops being just the consolidated young talent and becomes an axis of internal pressure, someone who, supported by Webber, can influence decisions, demand changes, and ultimately condition the direction that McLaren takes in the next races. Because what is at stake is no longer just recovering points or solving a specific failure. What is at stake is the credibility of the team in the face of one of its most important assets. And when that credibility is broken, the problem stops being technical and becomes political, strategic, and long-term. And the most dangerous thing for McLaren is that this pressure does not need to be made public to be effective. Because within the paddock, everyone understands how these dynamics work. Everyone knows how to read the silences, the decisions, and the movements. And right now everything indicates that Webber and Piastri are not willing to accept half explanations. And this is where everything reaches its most critical point, because after China there is no longer room for half measures within McLaren, and the situation enters a phase where the decisions made can mark not only this season, but the entire future of the project with Oscar Piastri. Because when a team loses technical control at the most important moment of the year, and at the same time begins to feel internal pressure from one of its key drivers in their environment, what is generated is not only a crisis. It is a scenario where each subsequent mistake can have much bigger consequences than it seems. Webber and Piastri's bomb reaches its true meaning here because it is no longer just about demanding answers, but about evaluating whether McLaren can really offer a winning environment in the short and medium term. And that is the most dangerous question that can exist within a Formula One team, because when a driver begins to doubt the project, everything changes. And the most delicate thing for McLaren is that this situation comes at the worst possible moment, right at the beginning of a new regulation where the teams that achieve early stability build the basis of the championship, while those that enter into internal doubts lose time, direction, and, above all, confidence, something that is extremely difficult to recover once it is broken. Here we are no longer just talking about reliability, we are talking about leadership, structure, the ability to react, because what Piastri and Webber are putting on the table, although they do not say it openly, is a direct question. Can McLaren sustain a championship project, or is it beginning to fall apart from within? And if the team does not respond forcefully in the next races, the next step is inevitable, because the internal pressure will be transformed into decisions, into movements, into changes that can completely alter the balance within the team, from technical management to the driver hierarchy itself. Because in Formula One, when an environment like Webber's detects weakness, it doesn't wait. It acts, and it does so with a long-term vision that goes far beyond a single race or a single retirement. And that is exactly what makes this situation so dangerous for McLaren. So the real unknown is not what went wrong in China. The real unknown is what is going to happen now, because this moment can be remembered as a simple stumble, or as the beginning of a silent break that began with abandonment, but that could end up changing everything within the team. And after everything that happened, the conclusion is as clear as it is disturbing. China was not a simple failure. It was a direct warning that even the most solid projects can begin to break from within when they lose control at the key moment. Because McLaren didn't just lose a race, it lost something much more important. It lost certainties, it lost that sense of dominance and stability that it had built after its recent success, and in its place it left technical doubts, unanswered questions, and an environment that right now is under constant pressure. And in the midst of all that, Oscar Piastri is no longer just a victim of the situation. He is a central figure in what may come, backed by a Mark Webber who is not willing to allow these types of mistakes to be repeated without consequences. And that combination makes every next step for McLaren decisive. Because when a pilot begins to demand guarantees, when his environment begins to put pressure from within, and when the team fails to respond clearly, the problem is no longer a specific one. and becomes a real threat to the stability of the project. Now McLaren is at a crossroads. It has to demonstrate on and off the track that it is still in control, that it can correct its mistakes, and that it is still a team capable of leading this new era. Because if it does not, this story will not be remembered for what happened in China, but for what began in China. And that's the real bomb. It's not what we've already seen, it's what can come next. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.